Hello, Create Schools. Today I wanted to talk about the impact of the Treaty of Versailles. So go ahead and get your notebook out to get ready to copy some notes. This shouldn't be surprising that the Treaty of Versailles had a huge impact on Germany. The Germans didn't really want to sign it. As you can see from these two political cartoons, here it says, "We won't sign." Okay? And then here behind his back, "Till we have to." So here's the German guy, and here's another German guy represented into another political cartoon, getting ready to stab him. There's a ball. Here's the Treaty of Peace, and he is being forced to sign it. So the Germans, as we do know from the last video, did have to sign the Treaty of Versailles, and because of that, a lot of bad things happen in Germany, ending in World War II. So let's take a look. Go ahead and put impact of Treaty of Versailles as your topic. And our first subtopic is non-representation. Now, of course, the Germans were really upset that they weren't involved in the peace talks. But if you kind of have to think about it. Germans were considered the losers. And so if you are writing rules for someone who did bad, you usually don't consult the people who were the ones who've done bad. Now, but remember, Germans did not feel that they lost the war. Okay, that's the next point. The Germans didn't feel that they'd lost the war, so they didn't feel they should be excluded from it. But, the Germans are correct. They didn't lose the war. It stopped before the Germans lost, but Germans' other option was to not sign it and continue the war, and then Germany would have lost the war. So here's a political cartoon that is very, very common. It says, "You've got to swallow it whether you like it or not," and they're trying to force him a pill of the peace terms. And the little guys over here, so here's your big three. So big four pills worth millions of, I don't know what this last word is, but it's either millions of dollars or millions of lives. Here we've got the people, the British Empire, France, America, Italy, Japan, all be forcing Germany to accept the peace terms. Okay, if you are not done, so when you take the notes, you do not have to write everything in all these political cartoons. The only thing you have to copy are the stuff that I have typed out for you. Okay, and let's look at the next slide. Okay, then political violence in Germany. And maybe as you take a really quick look at this slide, you see a very familiar face in here, right here. I'll give you all a couple of seconds. Hopefully you didn't even need it to know who it is. And that is Hitler. So I'll get back to him in just a second. So some examples of the political unrest due to the dislike of the new government. So we have the Kapp-Putsch, and its attempted revolution in 1920, but it was stopped by a strike from the Berlin workers. Okay. Then we have the foreign minister was murdered by extremists in the summer of 1922. And then comes the Munich Putsch. So these are pictures of the Munich Putsch. You may also recognize this picture as well. Take you a couple seconds. It is a famous place in Germany, or in Munich. So this is the Hofbrauhaus. So when you go into the Hofbrauhaus, if you go up the stairs, I guess you go all the way up to the stairs, and then there is a big, huge room to your left. That is where this took place. So if you are in Munich, I guess you probably can't go into the Hofbrauhaus at this time, but as soon as you're allowed in it, you can go all the way upstairs. Even when the Hofbrauhaus itself is closed, it's normally open because it is a historical monument. This is where Hitler led in November 1923 an attempt to overthrow the government. We're going to discuss this more in Chapter 3, what happens here. So I'll just leave it as that. Okay, so here are the notes you have to take. If you are not done, pause the video. If we are done, we're going to go on to the next slide. Okay, our next topic is the conflict in the Ruhr. So if remember, this is the Ruhrgebiet. It's also, it's right next to the Rhineland. Sorry, here's the Ruhr, here's the Rhineland. This is the area that was demilitarized. So German and French soldiers were not allowed in here. Okay, here is the rest of what Germany looked like. Here's the other part of Germany. So here's our Polish corridor. Okay, so the reparations was paid in 1921 for 50 million pounds. But in 1922, the Germans stopped paying it. So in 1923, French and Belgian soldiers, they went into the Ruhr. Here we go. They went into here and started taking the raw materials and the goods from the Ruhr in order to get their reparation payment. The Germans went on strike and decided they weren't going to produce anything more, and because of that 100 workers were killed. This resulted in Germany having no goods to trade and no money to buy things, and this caused hyperinflation. Okay? We'll also talk more about this invasion in the Ruhr in Chapter 2. So let's go on. I'll pause here if you need to finish copying. If you are ready to go on, come on with me. Okay, hyperinflation in Germany. This I find one of the most fascinating things in German history, or actually lots of history. What happened because Germans didn't have all this money? Basically, their money became worthless. Okay, the government started printing more and more money, and so the more money that is printed, it means that the money is not backed by anything, which means the money's not worth it. Okay, so if you think nowadays the amount of money that we have is backed by gold. Okay, this is very complicated economics. If you're really interested in all this hyperinflation, you should definitely take business class when Dr. G offers it. But really basic, money is backed by gold. If you have more money than gold, and the more money, that means each bill, each shine is worth less gold. And so therefore, hyperinflation occurs. And what that means is, let's look right here at the loaf of bread. Now after I put this picture, and I was told that this loaf is sideways, picture sideways, but it's how the whole thing came from, so enjoy your sideways bread. So in November 1918, one loaf of bread cost 1 mark. In 1922, so that is before the Ruhr, it cost 163 marks. So September 1923, so this is all the Ruhr invasion, when the France and Belgium come in and try to take over the Ruhr to get the reparations back. It's 1,500,000 marks for one loaf of bread. So go ahead and calculate between 1918 and 1923 how many years that is. Okay, 5 years later, from 1 mark to 1.5 million marks. 1 month later, 200 billion marks to buy one loaf of bread. So in 5 years, it went up to 200 billion marks. Basically, that means you've got so little, the money is basically worthless. And if you look right here for the pair of shoes, in 1914, a pair of shoes cost 10 Denmark. Or Deutsche Mark, sorry. And 22 is 1,400 Deutsche Mark. And 1 year later, I have to pause to read that number. That is 30 trillion. Trillion, billion, million, thousand. 30 trillion. I mean, basically, the money is so worthless that people burnt the bills instead of buying wood, because it was cheaper to burn a bag of bills than it was to buy wood with it. Okay? Common people had sorry about the typo. Common people had no money to buy anything. Prices could be raised in a matter of minutes, so if you're in a long line, the price could double while you're in line, and people were paid daily now, because basically if you wait till the end of the week to get your money, it's worthless by the time you get it. And people basically sat there thinking, this is the fault of the Treaty of Versailles. And they were more and more and more and more angry. So on that note, we'll actually start chapter 3 with these last 2 slides in mind. The hyperinflation, the Germans upset, Hitler coming in, doing the Munich Putsch, Okay, and that is basically how Hitler was able to take over to do all the things he did in before World War II. So that's all the notes for today. And if you have any questions, please let me know.